Want to retire early? You can do it. We can help. Today we're talking about people who want to retire young and some of the considerations that they should make. So let's start off. Adam, what is retiring young even mean?
Well, we ask that to our clients. When do they expect to retire? And more often than not, we get an age of 65. When we ask them where they came up with that, they don't necessarily know. They just say, I just always thought it was 65. And the reality is they're not alone. 70% of current workers, when asked, expect to retire at 65 or later. But the reality is only about half of them actually do. So Matt, what's the reason for this? What's the difference between expectations in retirement versus reality?
So I think part of it starts with when people are at work, retirement is almost a dream, like a daydream for a lot of people. And so what they're doing is they're thinking about not having to go to work. And there's, I think, a difference between thinking about not having to show up for your job versus being retired. So you mentioned a stat that came from the Employee Benefit Research Institute, which basically says that 30% of people actually retire after age 65. That means the lion's share do it younger. And so if people are actually retiring younger, and they said that the lion's share are doing it closer to age 62, why is that? So, there's some reasons that we would characterize as not so good and others that are really very good. Some people are retiring for reasons that they can't control. They have health issues. They become disabled. Their company downsized them, and maybe it's difficult to go find another job, either at a later age or maybe their skill set is a little bit outdated. And then sometimes we see people are home because they have to care for a spouse who may have those health issues or those disabilities. So if you're married or if you have a significant other or someone that you live with, maybe an extended family member even, sometimes their health issues drive what we do in terms of workforce. On the flip side of that coin, sometimes people retire because they can afford to do it. They were good savers or they came into an inheritance, and maybe they just want to do something else with their time. So we often have conversations with people where, in reality, their retirement is just that they left their full-time career. It doesn't mean that they sit home and do nothing. And now you can do all kinds of other things because, look, you just gained 40 or 50 or 60 hours a week that before you were tied up with a job and maybe commuting to and from that job. So, specifically, what are we thinking about when we're deciding about when we want to retire? And the way we do it here at our firm is we think about it in basically three categories. So there's some factors that we have absolutely no control over. What will the markets return on investments? We have no control. We try to be smart about it. We try to understand the risks, but it's totally beyond our ability to control. What will taxes look like? I mean, how often do taxes get changed? Everyone tries to predict what taxes will look like in the future. Very few do it well. What about benefits? Companies change their benefits plans over time, and sometimes that drives a decision. Beyond that, there's a couple things maybe we have a little bit of control over. So our earnings, we could be more ambitious pursuing higher earnings, or we could be more interested in lifestyle decisions and accept a lesser earnings type of a career. Maybe longevity, how long we're planning to live should play into that. We have a little bit of control, but not total control. The things we can control are how much money we save, how much money we spend. That's the big one. And I know when we talk with clients or when we talk with employees of retirement plan clients, we tell them that there's lots of things that factor in that you can't do anything about. But the one thing you have total control over, saving and spending. How much are you going to put away? How much are you going to spend? Now, obviously, there are some things we don't have much choice over when it comes to spending money. We need housing, we need food, we need transportation. But I think if we're all honest with ourselves, there's some people who like to indulge a little too much. And that could be tamped down. The last thing you can control, of course, is how your money is invested. Where is it invested? And what is it invested in? So, Adam, what are some considerations that people might want to be aware of when they're thinking about these sort of quality of life issues and financial issues?
Sure. There's really, I think, nothing more gratifying when we're able to work with a client to potentially retire at an age that's not considered traditional. That could be 50, 55. It frees up a tremendous amount of time for them to pursue their interest. But there are certain considerations that when we're building financial plan, we have to pay particular attention to. The first one I would discuss is healthcare. Oftentimes, you get your healthcare through your employer, and when you are leaving the workforce earlier than expected, now that responsibility to get health insurance is on you, and it can be a major expense. A large part of what your lifestyle is going to look like, the resources that you need. Another thing that is very important to consider is, for many, one of the major savings tools that we use for retirement is in things called retirement accounts, whether that's an IRA, whether that's a 401k. These are vehicles in which we're saving tax deferred for a future use. But those plans generally have a provision that says you can't access them until 59 and a half. So what do you do then? There's this gap that we need to, bridge. And it's very important, as Matt had stated earlier, that you have certain assets or investments earmarked to give you the cash flow that you need to get you to a point in which you can access, retirement assets. And it's not only assets that you've accumulated. It could be things like Social Security. It may be a pension that you're only eligible to receive at, age 65, for example. It's important to have a bucketing strategy that says, if I'm retiring at 55, the next 5 years of my living expenses are coming out of, this source, this account. Now, one of the nice things about it is because you are no longer going to have earned income, what you may find is, since you're taking mostly your lifestyle resources from savings and investments, you may find that you're in a much lower tax bracket than what you were when you were working. So that could mean that for every dollar that you use, a much smaller share of it is going to pay federal and state taxes. I just mentioned two financial things to consider, but there's also some really important qualitative ones that may be unique as well. We talked about the benefit of having more free time, but it's important to remember that sometimes you want to spend that time with loved ones. Is your spouse, are your friends, are they going to be available to travel with you? Are they going to be able to do the midday golf or tennis? If you're the only one in your social circle that is, retiring, earlier in a non-traditional way, it's just important to be prepared for that. It's a gift to have all this additional time, but it's not always an easy transition. The last thing I would maybe, point out that's sort of a little bit more qualitative is, when we say retire early, what we're really identifying is to, stop full-time work. But in reality, it's becoming much more common that you could, retire from your 9-to-5 employer, but decide that you want to consult for them on a part-time basis. You may want to pursue a different career in a limited capacity, but for something in which you have a passion for, a real interest. When people are, working in retirement, it's not only for financial reasons. Oftentimes it's for, qualitative reasons. They want to be part of a community. They just, don't want to sit home and, watch more and more TV, which, by the way, statistically, the hours of watching TV goes up significantly in retirement. Matt, anything I missed?
I think that's the idea. I think, I remember when I first started my career looking at marketing brochures where they always had this, couple on a sailboat looking far too young to not have a care in the world. But it's something we can attain if we plan ahead and whatever that looks like. So it's not a sailboat for everybody, and it's not the same age for everybody, but making sure that we think about what our life should look like and then developing the financial plan to help get us to that. I think that's the critical piece. So no two people are going to be exactly the same, but I think that would be how I would sum that up. What about, on that subject, Adam, what about, with regard to financial planning, what are some things that we think about if we're going to turn the dial on when we're actually planning to retire and not rely on that full-time salary any longer?
Sure. I think anytime you do something that's out of the norm, it's really important that you try to be as specific as possible. There's a lot of rules of thumb that go along with retirement, and often the assumption that's being made is that you're retiring at age 65. So if you're not doing that, what are some considerations? Well, one is that, there's a variety of resources that will tell you how on track you are for retirement. Based off of your income and your age, they'll say, okay, you should have, 4 times of your income saved by this particular period, and you're on track. Well, you can throw those generalizations out the door because what you've now decided to do is retire 5, 10, 15 years earlier than what those assumptions are utilizing. So you really need a specific financial plan in order to get you through that. Sort of similar to that, you often hear, best practice or rules in terms of your investment mix once you get into retirement. But again, they are assuming an investment time horizon that maybe is mortality at 90 or 95, and you're retiring at 65. So these assets have to, produce your lifestyle needs for 25 or 30 years. Well, if you're retiring 15 years earlier than that, then you certainly cannot utilize the same investment mix that you would if you retire, 15 years later, because that investment time horizon, your needs have just increased significantly. So I would say that is definitely something that should be on your mind. It's not only having assets in the near term to bridge that gap until you're able to access liquidity to your qualified accounts, but it's also investing for the future, thinking about inflation, and just realizing that now you've potentially added on a number of years more, which probably requires you to either A, save significantly more, or B, probably have an investment mix that is a little bit more focused on long-term growth.
Yes, I think what happens too is, when we do financial planning, especially if you go online and you use one of the many available calculators, it's going to make certain assumptions. And I think what we're talking about today is that for the people who don't want to follow that molded assumption set, that their plan needs to be a little bit more flexible and be able to accommodate that difference. There are people who are going to spend more years in retirement than they did working. And so the years that they spent working and saving and accumulating and growing assets to provide that future income might need to last much longer than a lot of those online calculators or models are going to provide, right?
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that. I should have mentioned flexibility right up front. Having, even when you go through the process of working with us and having a specific financial plan, that is only good for the present. Changes in health, changes in what your desire, what you're trying to accomplish in retirement, as well as what's happening out in those things that you can't control, taxes, the investment markets. All of those things are going to affect your plan, and you really do need to have the flexibility to be able to adjust to that.
Yeah. So I think these are some good considerations. People will ask basically in many of our interactions that we have with clients and potential clients and even employees of our retirement plan clients. Will I make it? Basically, we always turn around and say, well, what does make it mean for you? And sometimes people think we're being snippy, and maybe we are. But in reality, will I make it should be emphasizing the I in will I make it. So what does make it mean for you? And then backing into the timeline will then drive a lot of these financial considerations and otherwise. The other part of will I make it, I think maybe you could even say the flip side of the same coin. Where are the pitfalls that I'm not seeing? So what are the potential hazards in whatever plan we put together? And then how much of that do I want to be protected against? So I think these are all important considerations. Hey, look, we mentioned several concepts and topics to consider on this episode of Millstone River Live. If you'd like help putting it all together, why not reach out? You can contact us at podcast@millstone-river.com or by phone at 856-446-4700. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Millstone River Live and encourage you to share it with someone you think might benefit. Millstone River Wealth Management is an independent wealth management firm based in New Jersey. We form a supportive partnership with our clients and help with financial education and planning. You can send feedback or questions to podcast@millstone-river.com. More information about our firm can be found online at millstone-river.com.